Hi there, I'm Tim Gallagher, a team member with Eversound, and I'm here today with Penny Cook, the President and CEO at Pioneer Network, an organization focused on inspiring culture change and innovation, and also providing learning in the senior living industry as a whole. So thanks so much for inviting me out to Denver.
Yes, well thanks for coming. We love to have visitors out here.
This is gorgeous out here.
And it's a beautiful day. We're very lucky.
I'm very lucky. But today I wanted to talk about that change, like what change looks like now and what the future holds for elder care. Because I've noticed that you have actually been caring for elders pretty much your whole career. So what brought you to this industry and what inspires you to keep going?
That's a great question. You know, I was so fortunate growing up because I grew up with all of my grandparents around me, and that meant all of these great aunts and uncles as well. So the whole idea of growing older was just something that was so normal for me. I was always around elders and I felt so comfortable around elders as well. And so when I was deciding sort of what my path was going to be post-college, I decided I definitely wanted to work in healthcare and I definitely wanted to work with older adults. And so that's what I did starting from my first job out of grad school, and it's continued to this day. And in different areas, but always working with elders. And one of the things I also saw was that our system really didn't support elders as individuals as they got older. We had this one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter system of care and support. And I just always believed that we could change that it should be different. And I wanted it to be different not only for my family members and friends, but for myself as I get older as well. So I've always just stayed in this area.
Yeah, what was that first job?
It was actually at a hospital in Rochester, New York. It was at a teaching hospital, Strong Memorial Hospital. And interestingly enough, the Pioneer Network started in Rochester, New York. Yeah. So some of the founders of Pioneer were actually my mentors as a social worker when I got that first job at 22 years old out of grad school.
That's awesome, comes full circle.
It definitely has come full circle.
Yeah. So something that actually interested me about Pioneer Network was the focus on person-centered care. And can you talk a little bit more about how we can, as a culture, as people, really change that from just treating the masses to a person-centered care, especially for senior living communities where they're, whether it's one community or many.
Sure.
What does that look like?
Well, I think the first thing it comes down to, and this is one of our foundational values at Pioneer Network, is truly knowing the person. And it's interesting, when you actually think about that, it seems so simple, but when you truly know a person, you know what they want, you know truly what their individual needs are, and it really allows you to provide a plan of care and support for them that is tailored to that person. And it's sort of what we probably all want in relationships in our life. We want to be known. Right. And so really that's the foundational value. And if you think about everything in those terms, in that term of knowing the person well, that really becomes the center of person-centered care.
How do you see that happening on a larger scale? So like someone who that cares for many people in a day, getting to know that many people on a daily basis, or is it just something that comes with time? Have you seen any, maybe even technologies that end up helping with that?
Sure. Well, I think that it's probably a little bit of both. I think that there has to be more of a concerted effort to get to know people, and it may take a little bit more time on the front end, but I think that it really actually provides the caregiver, the staff, a better opportunity to provide the care and support that they want to give when they tailor it to that person, so it becomes easier once they know that person and their routine. And I think it's those small interactions. I had a person ask me one time, a resident in a nursing home, if there was one thing that I would have staff do that didn't cost any money to really move forward person-centered care, what would it be? And I said, take an extra 30 seconds in every interaction you have with someone to really try to get to know them a little bit better. And I think that that's really true, and I think that we can infuse that. But I do think that we have more technology out there to also help with getting to know a person. And actually that helps, obviously, the person themselves, who's more of the receiver of care and support, but it also helps the staff too. I mean, there's a lot of engagement technology out there. There's a lot more technology out there that allows staff members to have a person's story right in front of them, whether it's tablet technology or things like that, that, if it's a new staff person, they can actually read the story of a person's life. That's huge.
Yeah.
And that's not something we had before. It's a lot different than going into an old chart and having to flip through to try to get to know somebody.
Right. Is there something in particular that has caught your interest in the senior living industry that is a source of positive change, either now or something that's coming that
Sure.
you've seen research around?
I think that there's a lot of things. I think that senior living is sort of late to the game in some ways to sort of the technological advances that have been happening. But now we're seeing so much happening. And I think that there's two areas that I'm very interested in that I think can be so helpful. One is telehealth. I think the idea of telemedicine is one thing, and that's very needed. But the overall idea of telehealth, there are so many rural communities that just don't have the access to different things than more urban areas do. So the fact that we can provide some of the engagement technology, some of the true medical care remotely, I think is just a game changer for some of these rural communities. And I think the other thing that I see that I'm really interested in is all the technology relying on voice activation. That, I think, is huge. And I think that really can empower people as they get older. We talk about people not having as much control sometimes as they get older and they're faced with cognitive impairments or physical impairments. Voice activation, I think, is a way that can really assist people in empowering them and keeping some of that control.
Yeah, that was something interesting I was reading up on recently of a man who was diagnosed with dementia, Alzheimer's specifically, went through the hardships of that realization, but then perked back up and started implementing things like Amazon Alexa, voice activation, said, I put my keys here. And then he would ask later, the same kind of thing. But what has the experience been with implementing innovations and new technologies into the senior living space, and what causes that?
Well, I think at first it was just very slow. And I think that was probably for a few different reasons. I'll tell you that I used to be a long-term care ombudsman, so I advocated for people who lived in nursing homes and assisted living communities. And even though we all had internet in our own house and we were able to access Wi-Fi in other places, there were people who were living in nursing homes and assisted living communities that could not. Because the technology, and it wasn't like it was advanced technology because it was everywhere else, but it wasn't in some of those settings. So that was a huge barrier, obviously, to so many different things. And I think now we're finally seeing the wave turn. So we not only have communities that are investing in technology, but I think we have technology companies that are really interested in getting into the space of aging. I mean, I think that some people think that it's really cool that this is sort of an environment that hasn't been focused on as much as other spaces have. And so there's lots of different opportunities. I think there's always that slippery slope, though, that we have to be careful of technology replacing something else that maybe we really need in our lives.
Like human connection.
Human connection. And I think that we find that, ourselves, with technology, whether it's social media or other things, we have to limit our technology sometimes. But I think, so I think we need to be mindful of that, but I think there are some opportunities there that we really need to look into more. And so there's excitement. Yeah. So I see that I see that technology is advancing now, probably at a faster rate than ever before in the world of aging.
Yeah, that's great. Is there any particular technologies just a few that you've noticed come out recently or that are on their way out that you're super excited about?
You know, I think that virtual reality is something that is very interesting to me, and I still think that from what I've seen, I would still call it in its infancy as far as getting traction, but I do think that it could have a place for older adults and elders. And I say that because I look at my own mom. I always look at things sort of through her lens. And she loved to travel when she was younger. But she's at a point now where she does not like to travel independently. She doesn't even like to travel on tours anymore because it's hard for her to walk as far as she used to be able to walk. And she doesn't feel like she can, get in and out of a bus easily or things like that to travel. Well, because she loved to travel so much, some of the virtual reality that's out there, she would love to use that to be able to have that experience. One place she's never gone to is Japan. She's always wanted to go to Japan. And she's 85 now, and she told me, I'm never going to get there. And she's made the decision that she's not. So if she could have the virtual experience of being there, that would be so cool for her. So it's not for everyone. And I don't think that anything is ever for everyone, but for people to have choice, that if this is something that they want to use, I think that could be huge.
Yeah. Have you seen a lot of success with that in the communities that you've talked to?
You know, I haven't actually seen a community who's using it on a regular basis, but I've experienced it myself and I've seen elders use it. At our conference last year, we had a technology experience. So we were showcasing all different kinds of technology that was out there. And we had elders themselves who were using the technology. And so I saw the experiences that they were having, and they loved it.
Yeah.
Now again, it's not for everyone, obviously, and nothing should be. But for people who wanted it, they really enjoyed it. So.
Yeah. What about things that make everyday life easier? You know, that like VR is an amazing experience, and you get to see these luxurious places that you wouldn't normally, or just try fun things like roller coasters or something like that.
Sure.
But in terms of the everyday, like especially as your mother with some physical impairment or other people with a mental impairment, what?
Sure.
Have you seen anything that sparked your interest around those?
So I think it's interesting, and you mentioned the use of the echo. That, I think, that voice-activated technology, again, I think can be a game changer on a daily basis for people to be able to remain as independent as they want to remain. And so I also have a friend with early onset dementia who uses the Amazon Echo, not only for, the loss of keys or something like that, but actually when he puts water on to boil, for instance, he'll tell the Echo, let me check the water in a minute, or tell me to check the water in a minute. He uses it to take his medication as a reminder. I mean, that's all programmed into the Echo. That's huge. And so on a daily basis, that's enabling him to be able to live alone in his own apartment. Without that technology, I'm not sure if he would be able to do it. And so I think it's things like that. I think engagement technology that we're seeing that enables people to be engaged with their family if they're not living close to them. On a daily basis, that's hugely important for people. I think some of the technology that we have, and again, I think this is a slippery slope, but for monitoring technology of people's health conditions. When they're at home, when they're living in an assisted living community. There are programs out there. We used to use alarms on people if they were potentially going to fall. And what we found is that was really not a good thing for most people. It actually prevented them from moving, which caused other issues like bed sores and things like that. It also scared them when the alarm went off. So if they did stand up and the alarm went off, they were almost more prone to falling because they were sort of shocked. And when we hear an alarm, what do? We get up, right? And so it sort of, did not have the benefit that people were hoping for. Well, now there's technology where it's a silent alarm that actually goes to a computerized system. And so, I think that as we're realizing what some of the negatives are with technology, I think we're doing better and we're improving things so that it's truly beneficial for the person themselves.
Yeah, do you see, like, especially with the baby boomers coming, and they always want to have something person-centered or cared for them individually. You know, they're one to make change.
Sure.
Do you see this next generation coming in having an easier time bringing in those innovations and technologies like those things?
I think that everyone's hoping that they're going to push those things. I'm not sure if it's going to be easier at first, but I think that what we're seeing is there's more openness to bringing some of that technology in. But I think that just as a design factor, we have some older buildings for senior living where there just aren't enough outlets. I mean, there are some simple design changes that are going to be needed as well. I mean, think about plugging in your device and thinking about where we plug in our phones now to charge them. We want them next to our beds, we want them next to our chair, things like that, whether that's good or not. But I think that there are some changes that are going to be need to be made that are just pretty simplistic. But I think that baby boomers are going to push for the things that they want. And I think that you may not see that. I think it's going to be a gradual change. I really do. But I think you are going to see changes.
That's great. It's especially good to walk around to these communities and see residents implementing these new things as if they're just like anybody else. I got the opportunity to walk around with this wonderful woman who was showing me around her apartment and all her art, and the technology felt very integrated, like it was very casual. It didn't feel like it was being, it was out of place, like someone had just given to them and said, here you go, we'll see what happens.
Right.
But in general, given everything that we've been talking about, what do you think is the most important change that we can make, either as a society or as an industry, to make this change possible?
Well, I think that foundationally, we need to value aging. We need to value elders. I think that we've had a culture where there's a fear of growing older. And when there's a fear of something, we tend to push it away, and we don't necessarily want to invest in that, whether it's our time or energy or focus. And I think that that needs to change, and I think it is changing. I think that there's a lot of movements out there now to try to combat ageism. And so I think that that's a big focus, but I do think it's one of the reasons why we've still had a fairly institutional type of model to care and support people as they're growing older. So I really think that that's sort of that foundational approach. But I think, again, I think that the other thing we need to look at is that everyone's an individual, and people need choices as they grow older. They need choices and living options. We don't all live at our age in the same type of apartment, the same type of house. You know, we have our choices of where we want to live, in an urban area, suburban area, a rural area. I think that people need all those types of changes types of choices as they grow older as well. And I think that's hugely important, and that helps us to value the person themselves.
Yeah, how do you see us changing the culture in the easiest way as a whole to combat ageism? Is that something that you've seen any success in some way, or a certain type of person, that kind of thing?
You know, I think that as our society is looking at all the different isms out there, we're beginning to recognize that not only is ageism one of those isms, but that to actually be the antidote to an ism is getting to know somebody. Right. And so I think ageism is starting to be included in those conversations. I also think that as we've been having some of the workforce issues that we've been having, we just don't have staffing, not only in healthcare and senior living, but in so many different industries. We're beginning to see that there's a value to people as they grow older. And I think that's been a change in our society, because I think that we've had a thought process that at a certain point of time, you sort of lose that value because you lose your productivity. And I think now we're actually seeing a twist in that as you grow older, you still do have something to offer, and you still do have something to offer in the workforce. I think all these things are beginning to help us change how we look at aging, but I think we have a long way to go. And I think it takes all of us being very aware of our own attitudes towards aging and ageism, and those of the people around us.
And that's exactly why I'm glad I brought you on here. But in our conversation at all, was there any thoughts that were different from the topic we were talking about that kind of came up for you, or?
No, I think it's interesting as we talk about choices in senior living and we talk about where things are going. I think the only thing I was thinking of is I think that the baby boomers are also going to push for different types of communities. That right now we have, traditional assisted living, nursing home, continuing care, life plan communities. I think we're going to see different things. I think we're going to see communities that are based on lifestyle, whether it's LGBTQ, or I think there are different lifestyle cultural communities that we're going to see. I think we're going to see more intergenerational and co-housing communities. And I think there are going to be a lot of grassroots efforts that come up. I don't think it's all going to be formal coming from a developer or a government-based entity. I think it's going to be something that are going to start popping up organically because people want to have choice.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that sounds actually really natural. People kind of just congregating together. And what are your thoughts on intergenerational collaboration, I guess? That's, you had talked about a bit that separation. Do you see much of that happening, and in culture in general, not just in one senior living community or something like that?
Yeah, I think we are seeing more of that, and I think that some of it is coming out of necessity. We're hearing about these programs where there are college students, for instance, who are staying with older adults because it makes sense. Older adults have some space available, college students need a place to stay, and so they're actually developing their own sort of intergenerational co-housing environment, which is really cool to see. And I think that there are more programs that are happening, like true community programs between preschools and school-age children and high schoolers and elders. And I think that for a lot of people, that intergenerational connection is huge. I think what we need to remember is that not all people want that.
Right.
And so I look at, again, my mother, she's choosing to live in a community, in a housing community where everyone is over a certain age. And that's okay. That's her choice. She doesn't necessarily want to be around children as she gets older in that sort of way. And then there are other people that want that neighborhood where there's lots of activity with children. And so I think to offer more of those opportunities, but I think that we're seeing that happen naturally. And that's sort of the best way.
Yeah, it sounds like, we have a long way to go, but we also have really positive things happening that weren't happening before.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it gives me a positive outlook coming out of this, and I really appreciate you inviting me out to Denver to chat and learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and,
I'm so glad you came.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.